My name is Julia Emerson. I'm the woman who was abandoned by her husband while pregnant, who scrubbed motel bathrooms just to survive. Today, I'm the founder of MindBridge, a company that's helped over 8 million children learn in ways their brains actually understand. But don't mistake this for luck, because I had to walk through hell to get here. Before I share my full journey, a story of heartbreak, betrayal, resilience, and triumph, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to overcome something tough. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. My hand shook as I smoothed down my blazer for the third time. The New York Marriott marquee towered above me, its glass facade reflecting a woman I barely recognized. Successful, composed, wearing a designer suit I'd bought with my own money. Julia Emerson, founder of MindBridge, invited keynote speaker at the Edtech Innovation Summit. Not Julia Stanton. Never again, Julia Stanton. Mom, you're doing that thing with your ring again, Meera said beside me, her 12-year-old voice carrying that mix of concern and gentle teasing only daughters master. I looked down. Sure enough, I was twisting the simple silver band on my right hand. Not a wedding ring, just armor. Sorry, baby, I'm fine. You're not fine. You've checked the speaker list 17 times since breakfast. She pushed her glasses up her nose, a gesture so achingly familiar it made my chest tight. Those weren't my eyes behind those lenses. They were his. Richard Stanton, CEO of Stanton Tech. Closing keynote speaker. I'd known he would be here when I accepted the invitation. Part of me, the stupid, reckless part that still woke up sometimes expecting to find him beside me, had accepted because of it. 12 years. 12 years since I'd signed those papers with shaking hands. 12 years since I'd walked out of his lawyer's office with nothing but the clothes on my back and a baby growing inside me. We don't have to go in, Meera said quietly. We could just get pizza instead. There's that place you mentioned, Prince Street. I looked at my daughter, brilliant, kind, everything he'd never wanted her to be, and found my spine. No, we're here to talk about how MindBridge helps kids like you. That's what matters. But as we walked through those doors, my body remembered things my mind had tried to forget. The scent of his cologne at galas like this. The weight of his hand on my lower back, possessive and cold. The way he'd smile for cameras while whispering cutting remarks about my dress, my laugh, my inability to play the corporate wife correctly. The ballroom was already filling. Tech executives in $1,000 sneakers mingled with educators in sensible shoes. I guided Meera toward the registration table, keeping my head down, just another face in the crowd. Julia Emerson? I froze. Not his voice. Richard would never sound so uncertain. I turned to find a woman in her 50s, perfectly styled in that Manhattan way. I'm sorry, She paused, studying my face. You look familiar. Have we met? I don't think so. The lie came smooth as silk. I recognized her, too. Patricia Holloway, Stanton Tech's CFO. She'd been at our wedding. She'd sent flowers when Richard's father died. She'd stood silent in that boardroom when Richard announced our divorce. Her eyes flickered to Meera, and I saw the exact moment recognition dawned. The slight widening of pupils, the quick glance at my daughter's distinctive eyes, the way her mouth opened slightly. I pulled Meera closer. My mistake, Patricia said faintly. You just reminded me of someone. She walked away quickly, already pulling out her phone. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a mistake. I should never have come. But Meera was already pulling me toward the exhibition hall, excited about the AR demonstration she'd helped code, oblivious to the bomb that had just been lit. 20 minutes. That's how long it took. 20 minutes of Meera explaining our adaptive learning algorithms to fascinated teachers. 20 minutes of me pretending my world wasn't about to implode. 20 minutes before I felt the air change. I turned, and there he was. Time folded in on itself. Suddenly, I wasn't 34, successful, strong. I was 22 again, watching Richard Stanton stride into my linguistics lab at Columbia, lost and irritated and beautiful. Excuse me, he'd said, not really looking at me. I'm looking for Professor Chen's advanced computing theory. Wrong building, I'd replied, not looking up from my phonetic analysis. You want Mud Hall, North Campus. You could look at me when you're talking. That made me look. Those eyes, sharp as winter sky, impatient, entitled. Everything I should have run from. You could say please when you're asking for help. He'd smiled then, surprised. Richard Stanton wasn't used to being challenged. I should have known that smile was a warning. But I fell anyway. God help me, I fell hard. 6 months later, I was wearing his grandmother's ring. 2 years after that, I stood in a Vera Wang dress I couldn't breathe in, promising to love and honor a man I was only beginning to understand was more winter than warmth. The early years weren't all bad. That's what makes it worse, somehow. There were moments, Sunday mornings with coffee and the Times, surprise trips to Paris, the way he'd pull me close after board meetings and whisper, "Thank God you're here." I mistook need for love. I mistook possession for protection. The changes came slowly. A comment about my research taking too much time. A suggestion that I attend fewer conferences. A gentle insistence that Stanton Tech wives didn't work. They supported. They hosted. They smiled. "It's not giving up your career," he'd said, hands on my shoulders. "It's choosing us." So I chose. I left Columbia 6 months before defending my dissertation. I learned to host dinners for 40. I perfected the art of small talk with venture capitalists. I became what he needed, beautiful, silent, there. The loneliness was crushing. Our penthouse felt like a museum, all glass and marble and echo. Richard worked 18-hour days building his empire. I rattled around in designer clothes, forgetting the sound of my own thoughts. Then came the gala. March 15th. I wore the emerald dress he'd picked. I laughed at the right jokes. I stood by his side as he announced Stanton Tech's IPO plans. The perfect wife, until I went looking for him during cocktails and found him in the coat room with Alexandra Chen, our corporate lawyer. Her lipstick on his collar, his hand in her hair, the casual ease of familiar intimacy. I didn't make a scene. I'd learned better by then. I went back to the party. I smiled. I applauded his speech. I rode home beside him in silence, watching the city lights blur past. "You saw," he said finally. "Yes, it doesn't mean anything. It means everything." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Don't be dramatic, Julia. This is how the world works. I come home to you. Like I'm a house, a thing to come home to? Like you're my wife." He said it like it explained everything, like it excused everything. 2 weeks later, the nausea started. I threw up every morning, hiding it from him, from everyone. When the second line appeared on that test, I sat on our bathroom floor, Italian marble, cold as his eyes, and sobbed. I still remember the hope, fragile as spun glass, when I told him. Maybe a baby would change things. Maybe he'd remember why he'd married me. Maybe we'd be a family. "Get rid of it," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "The timing's wrong. The IPO. This is our child. This is a complication." He finally looked at me then, and I saw the truth clear as day. I wasn't his wife. I was an asset. And assets that became liabilities were disposed of. The papers were drawn up within a week. Sign, or he'd destroy me. Sign, and I'd get enough to disappear quietly. Sign, and never contact him again. I signed with my daughter's heartbeat fluttering inside me, strong and stubborn already. The Greyhound to Albuquerque smelled like desperation and industrial cleaner. I counted the cash in my wallet again, $2,000, everything I'd managed to hide. My wedding ring would have brought more, but I'd left it on his pillow like the cliché I'd become. The first motel asked for ID. When they ran my credit card, it was declined. Then another, and another. Richard's reach was long and precise. Julia Stanton had been erased. "Please," I begged the night clerk at a run-down place off Central Avenue. "I can pay cash. Just one night." She looked at my designer clothes, my swollen eyes, my hand pressed protective over my still flat stomach. "Honey, you running from someone?" "Yes." "He hit you?" "Not with his fists." She slid a key across the counter. "Room 106. First week's on the house. After that, you better figure something out." Maria Gonzalez saved my life that night, though she'd never take credit for it. She owned the Sunrise Motel, a place where people came to disappear or die. and somehow she decided I was worth saving. The room was clean but tired. Faded floral bedspread, water stains on the ceiling, a window that looked out on the parking lot. I sat on the bed and tried to remember how to breathe. No bank accounts. Frozen. No credit cards. Canceled. My phone disconnected. My email bounced back. Julia Stanton had vanished, and Julia Emerson didn't exist yet. Those first weeks blurred together. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Job applications rejected the moment they ran my social. Pawn shops that offered pennies for my designer bags. I lived on packaged ramen and tap water, threw up more than I kept down, and talked to the baby just to hear a voice. "We're going to be okay," I'd whisper, hand on my growing bump. "I don't know how, but we're going to be okay." Maria found me passed out in the parking lot one August afternoon, dehydrated and dizzy. She dragged me to her apartment behind the office, forced Gatorade down my throat, and put me to work. "You can clean rooms for cash," she said. "Under the table. But you gotta eat, Mama. That baby needs you strong." So, I cleaned. Motel rooms that had seen too much life, too much despair. I scrubbed and swept and learned that dignity wasn't something anyone could take. You had to give it away. And I refused. Evenings, I haunted the public library, using their computers to take free online courses, coding, digital marketing, AI, and language processing. My dissertation might be dead, but my brain wasn't. Not yet. The other motel residents avoided me at first. The pregnant woman with soft hands and harder eyes. But slowly, they accepted me, taught me things, where to get day-old bread, which churches served meals without sermons, how to make $5 stretch for 3 days. When I started showing, really showing, the looks began. Grocery store clerks who assumed I was a teenager, bus drivers who wouldn't meet my eyes. Good Christian women who whispered about those kinds of girls. "You got family?" Maria asked one night, watching me fold laundry with swollen fingers. "No, the father. Gone. Men ain't shit," she said matter-of-factly. "But babies are hope with heartbeats." She was right. Every kick, every flutter, every 3 a.m. dance party in my belly reminded me why I was fighting. Not for me, for her. I went into labor alone on a Tuesday night in December. Maria drove me to the hospital in her ancient Corolla, cursing in Spanish at every red light. 16 hours later, Meera arrived. 5 pounds, 2 ounces of pure stubbornness. "She's small," the nurse said, worried. "We'll need to monitor her." But when they placed her on my chest, when those eyes, his eyes, damn it, looked up at me, I knew. Small didn't mean weak. It just meant she'd have to fight harder, just like her mother. Meera was 3 when I realized she couldn't read like other kids. "The letters danced," she said. "They played tricks." The teacher at her preschool suggested testing, spoke gently about learning differences, handed me pamphlets I couldn't afford to implement. That night, I held my brilliant, frustrated daughter as she cried over a simple picture book. "I'm stupid, Mama. The words are mean to me." "No, baby, your brain just works differently, like a computer that needs different software." The idea hit me at 2 a.m., Meera finally asleep beside me in our tiny apartment. What if I could build that software? What if I could make the words stop dancing? I started simple. Color coding, animation, voice integration. Using my old linguistics knowledge and new coding skills, I built crude programs on a secondhand laptop Maria had found. Meera was my beta tester, my co-designer, my reason. "Make the bee blue, Mama. It feels blue." The story needs to move slower here. My brain gets tired. Within 6 months, she was reading. Not just reading, devouring books, writing stories, teaching other kids at the library's reading program. Word spread the way it does in communities like ours. Soon, I had a dozen kids crowding into our apartment, learning on my janky laptop. "You should enter this," said Janet Chen, the librarian who'd become my friend. She showed me a flyer. Southwest Women Entrepreneurs Competition. First prize, $50,000. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm just a mom with a computer. Same thing, honey. The application asked for a business plan. I didn't have one. I had a mission statement. Every child deserves to learn in the way their brain works best. The rest, I figured out as I went. standing in front of those judges. Real entrepreneurs, people with MBAs and connections. I felt like a fraud. But then I thought of Meera, of all the kids who'd been told they were stupid, lazy, not trying hard enough. MindBridge isn't just software, I said. It's a promise that we won't leave any child behind because their brain processes differently. They gave me the money. More importantly, they gave me credibility. The growth was organic, viral, in the way only parent networks can be. One success story shared at school pickup became 10. 10 became 100. Rural schools with no special education budgets bought licenses. Parents homeschooling kids with dyslexia, ADHD, autism, they found us. Meera remained my North Star. Now 8, she'd moved from user to consultant, sitting in on development meetings, testing new features, advocating fiercely for accessibility. "The font's too fancy," she'd declare. "Kyle won't be able to track it. We need a pause button here. Sometimes brains need to rest." By her 10th birthday, MindBridge had helped 100,000 kids. We'd moved to Austin for the tech scene, rented a real house with a yard. I'd hired a team, we had investors calling. But I protected our privacy fiercely. Emerson was my grandmother's maiden name. Our origin story stayed vague. Single mom makes good. No details about the father. No traces leading back to New York, to Stanton Tech, to the woman I'd been. I legally changed Meera's last name when she started school. Sealed her birth certificate. Scrubbed our digital footprint. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Richard had made clear what happened to inconveniences. "Why don't I have a dad?" Meera asked one night, working on a family tree project. "You do. He just couldn't be part of our lives." "Did he die?" "No, baby. He made choices, and we made better ones." She accepted that with the practical wisdom of a child who'd never known different. We were complete, she and I. We didn't need anyone else. Except now, standing in this New York ballroom, watching Richard's face cycle through shock, recognition, and something that looked almost like pain, I realized I'd been naive. You can't outrun the past. You can only choose how to face it when it finally catches up. His approach was a CEO's approach. Direct, purposeful, cutting through the crowd like they were stock prices to be ignored. I positioned myself between him and Meera, who was still explaining neural pathways to a fascinated teacher. "Julia," just my name, but waited with 12 years of silence. "Richard." I kept my voice professional, aware of the eyes turning our way. "I didn't realize you were interested in educational technology." "I'm interested in many things." His gaze flicked to Meera, back to me, including impossible coincidences. "Mom?" Meera had noticed the tension, turning with that protective instinct she'd inherited from somewhere. "Everything okay?" "Fine, baby. Why don't you go check out the VR station? I'll catch up." She hesitated, looking between us with those analytical eyes. His eyes. Then she nodded and moved away, throwing one last glance over her shoulder. "She's beautiful," Richard said quietly. "Don't." "How old?" "Don't do this here." 12? His voice was perfectly controlled, but I knew him, knew the tell in his jaw, the way his hands flexed. "She's 12, isn't she?" "Mr. Stanton," I said loudly enough for others to hear, "if you're interested in MindBridge's enterprise solutions, you can contact our sales team." I started to walk away. His hand caught my elbow, gentle enough to look polite, firm enough to stop me. "Room 4B, he said quietly. 10 minutes, or I make this conversation public." The conference room was sterile, corporate. He'd commanded it the way he commanded everything, with the assumption it would be given. I closed the door and faced him. "Is she mine?" "No." The word came out flat, final. "She's mine. Only mine." "You know what I mean." "Do I? Because 12 years ago, you were pretty clear about not wanting any complications." He flinched. "Good. I had the right to know." "You had the right?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You had your lawyer threaten to destroy me if I didn't disappear. You had my bank accounts frozen. You had me erased, Richard. What rights are we discussing exactly?" I was protecting the company." "You were protecting yourself?" He sat heavily in one of the chairs and for a moment looked older than his 45 years. "My mother told me you'd left town, started over. She said it was best for everyone." "Your mother knew?" "She handled things. After." He ran a hand through hair still thick, still perfectly styled. "I didn't ask questions." "Of course you didn't." Questions were complications. Don't. His CEO mask slipped, showing something raw underneath. You think it was easy? You vanished. No trace. I tried. You tried? I slammed my hands on the table. I cleaned motel rooms while pregnant. I gave birth alone. I watched my baby struggle to breathe because she was underweight. Where exactly were you trying, Richard? I didn't know about the baby. Get rid of it. Those were your exact words. I thought you had. Well, I didn't. I couldn't. And thank God, because she's the only good thing that came from us. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Manhattan spread below us, his kingdom of glass and steel. What's her name? I hesitated. But what was the point of lying now? Meera Emerson. Emerson, my grandmother's name, my name now. She has my eyes. She has her own eyes that see the world in ways you never could. He turned back to me. I want to meet her, properly. Absolutely not. She's my daughter. She's the child you threw away. I moved toward the door. You don't get to claim her now that she's brilliant and whole and wonderful. You don't get to waltz in after I did all the work. I have rights. You have nothing. I paused at the door. And if you try to pursue this, I'll go public with everything. The affairs, the coercion, the illegal freezing of my assets. I kept records, Richard, insurance. You're threatening me? I'm protecting my daughter. Something you never understood how to do. The story broke 3 days later. Not from Richard, from Patricia Holloway, who'd apparently grown a conscience in her retirement. Tech Titan's secret child screamed from every blog, every gossip site, every business newsletter. My phone exploded. Reporters at our house. Meera's school calling, concerned about security. Investors wanting to know if this scandal would affect MindBridge's stability. Mom? Meera stood in my home office doorway, iPad in hand. Why are there pictures of us online? I'd prepared for this moment for 12 years. Practiced the words. But looking at my daughter's confused face, everything I'd planned evaporated. Come here, baby. She curled into my lap like she had when she was small, though her legs now dangled nearly to the floor. I told her the truth. Simply, honestly, about a young woman who loved the wrong man, about choosing to be her mother when everything else fell apart, about building our life from scratch. So Richard Stanton is my biological father? Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, does he know about my dyslexia? Of all the questions she could have asked. No, baby, he doesn't know anything about you. Good. She sat up, fierce. He doesn't get to know, not the important stuff. But Richard wasn't done. The legal notice arrived the next morning. Petition for paternity testing, visitation rights, shared custody. Everything I'd feared, wrapped in expensive letterhead. Worse was the counter notice from Edtech's board. Cease and desist. Defamation claims. If I didn't sign an NDA and refuse all press, they'd bury me in litigation. They can't do this, my lawyer said, but her eyes said otherwise. They can't win, but they can drain you dry trying. That night, I found Meera coding furiously, building what looked like a presentation. What's this, baby? My speech for tomorrow's accessibility conference. She looked up, eyes blazing. I'm going to tell them about us. All of it. How you saved me, how MindBridge saved others, how nobody gets to erase us again. Meera, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned back to her screen. He threw us away, but we turned into diamonds anyway. People should know that. The call came at midnight. Richard, control your daughter. Like you controlled me? This isn't a game, Julia. The board is furious. The IPO is your problem, not mine. I'll withdraw the custody petition. Tell her not to give that speech. Tell her yourself. Oh, wait, you can't. Because you don't know her. Don't know that she hates being told what to do. That she puts hot sauce on everything. That she reads herself to sleep with astronomy books. That she wants to code for NASA someday. Silence. Then quietly, I could have known. No, you couldn't have. Because knowing her would have meant seeing her as a person, not a complication. And you never learned how to do that. The Austin Convention Center was packed. Edtech professionals, teachers, parents of kids with learning differences. And there, in the third row, Richard Stanton, trying to blend in, failing spectacularly. Meera took the stage like she owned it. 12 years old, 4 feet 11 inches of determination in her lucky purple dress. Hi, she began. I'm Meera Emerson. I have dyslexia. And I want to tell you about my mom. She talked about watching me work 3 jobs, about falling asleep to the sound of my coding, about being my first beta tester, my harshest critic, my biggest cheerleader. Some people get handed their success, she said, looking directly at Richard. Others build it from nothing. My mom built MindBridge from love, just love, and that's why it works. The standing ovation was immediate. But I only watched Richard, saw him wipe his eyes, saw him leave before she left the stage. That evening, an email. I withdraw all claims. The board has been handled. Tell her I'm proud of both of you. R. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. He wants to meet me, Meera said 6 months later, looking at the email on her phone. Says he'll respect whatever boundaries I set. We were in our new office. MindBridge had outgrown the garage startup phase. Glass walls covered in kids' thank you drawings, a testing lab full of laughter, 30 employees who believed in our mission. What do you want? I asked. She spun in her chair, thinking. I want to know if I got my math brain from him, and I want him to see what he missed. So we set terms. Public space, 1 hour. I'd be present. Any pushiness, any manipulation, and we walked. He chose a quiet corner of a hotel restaurant. Showed up 5 minutes early, nervous in a way I'd never seen. When Meera walked in, he stood so fast he knocked over his water glass. Hi, she said simply. Hi. They sat, studied each other. The similarities were undeniable. The eyes, the analytical tilt of their heads, the way they both tapped their fingers when thinking. I have questions, Meera announced. Okay. Do you have dyslexia? No, but my sister does. Did you help her? No, I thought she should try harder. Meera nodded, filing that away. What's your favorite programming language? And suddenly they were talking code. Algorithms. The elegance of Python versus the power of C++. Watching them, I saw what could have been, should have been, if Richard had been a different man 12 years ago. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, looking at me. For all of it. I don't need your apology, but I need to give it. He turned to Meera. I made the worst mistake of my life. Twice. Letting your mother go. Not fighting to know you. Why? Meera's question was genuine. Curious rather than accusatory. Because I was afraid. Of responsibility. Of change. Of love that I couldn't control. He laughed bitterly. I controlled $1 billion company but couldn't handle the idea of a baby. That's sad, Meera said matter-of-factly. You missed everything good. I know. The hour ended. As we prepared to leave, Richard pulled out a folder. What's this? College fund. In her name. No strings. No conditions. He looked at Meera. You want to code for NASA? You should have every opportunity. We don't need... I started. It's not about need. He interrupted gently. It's about what she deserves. What you both deserved from the beginning. Meera took the folder. Practical as always. Thank you. I'll use it to help other kids too. Mom taught me that success means pulling others up with you. Richard's smile was sad. She taught you well. We email now. Carefully. Professionally. He sends Meera coding challenges. She sends him updates on MindBridge's impact. He donated anonymously to our scholarship fund. Anonymously, but I knew. He's learned to give without taking credit. Do you hate him? Meera asked one evening as we watched the sunset from our back porch. I did for a long time, but not now. Now I nothing him. He's just a man who made choices. We made better ones. Are you happy, Mom? Really happy? I looked at my daughter. Brilliant, kind, strong. Thought about the company we'd built, the lives we'd changed, the future stretching ahead bright with possibility. Yeah, baby, I really am. Stanton Tech went public last month. Richard stepped down as CEO, citing personal reevaluation of priorities. He teaches now, pro bono coding classes in underserved communities. Learning, maybe, what it means to build rather than control. I bought a house last week, our forever home, with a workshop for Meera and garden space for me. On the front door, a small plaque. Success isn't defined by where you start, it's defined by how you rise. We rose, oh how we rose. 5 years later, I stood in the same Marriott marquee ballroom where everything had unraveled. This time, I was the closing keynote. Innovation through adversity, building Edtech that matters. You nervous? Meera asked, now 17 and headed to MIT in the fall. Taller than me now, confident in ways I'd never been at her age. Always. Liar. She grinned. You've given this talk 100 times. Never here, though. Never where it all began. Never with him in the audience. Richard had RSVP'd through his assistant. A professional courtesy. He sat in the back row, graying now, wearing a simple button-down instead of his usual designer suit. We'd developed a rhythm over the years. Birthday emails, holiday cards, the occasional coffee when Meera asked. He'd learned to be grateful for scraps. I'd learned to stop punishing him for old wounds. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator announced, Julia Emerson, Time Magazine's Innovator of the Year. The applause carried me to the podium. I looked out at 500 faces. Educators, developers, parents of kids like Meera. My people. Our people. 17 years ago, I began. I sat in a bathroom stall in this very hotel, pregnant and terrified. Having just discovered my husband's affair, I thought my life was over. Silence. Even the waitstaff stopped moving. Today, MindBridge helps 8 million children worldwide learn in ways their brains understand. We've partnered with UNESCO. We've brought adaptive learning to refugee camps, rural schools, anywhere kids are told they're not enough. I talked about failure as foundation, about building from rubble, about choosing to transform pain into purpose. I didn't mention Richard by name, but I didn't need to. This wasn't about him anymore. It had stopped being about him the moment Meera took her first breath. Success, I concluded, isn't about what you achieve. It's about who you lift up along the way. Every child who reads their first book using our software, every parent who stops crying at homework time, every teacher who finally reaches that unreachable kid, that's success. The standing ovation was immediate, but I only had eyes for my daughter, beaming from the front row. My North Star, my reason. Afterwards, at the reception, Richard approached. We'd gotten better at this. The careful dance of shared history and separate lives. That was extraordinary, he said simply. Thank you. I mean it. What you have built, what you've done. I spent 20 years building a company. You spent 17 building a legacy. We both built what we knew how to build. No, he shook his head. You built what mattered. I'm still learning the difference. Meera appeared at my elbow, protective as always. Mom, they want you for the group photo. Be right there. I looked at Richard. You could join, if you want. Board members and major donors are invited. His eyes widened slightly. I'm neither. You donated $10 million to our scholarship fund. Anonymously? Richard. I said his name gently without heat. Nobody's anonymous to the person they used to be married to. Come on. One photo. He followed us to where the group was assembling. Meera naturally moved between us, chatting with other donors about her MIT plans, her summer internship at NASA, the accessibility apps she was developing. Our daughter. Brilliant and whole and nothing like either of us had imagined. Everything better than we could have dreamed. Thank you, Richard said quietly as the photographer adjusted his lens, for letting me see this, see her, even a little. Thank you, I replied, surprising myself, for letting us go. The camera flashed. 3 people who'd found their way to forgiveness, even if they'd never be a family. 3 lives that intersected and diverged and somehow, against all odds, had each found their own version of happiness. Walking out into the Manhattan night, Meera linked her arm through mine. You okay, Mom? Yeah, baby, I really am. And I was. We'd built our life from ashes and made it beautiful. Not despite the pain, but because of what we'd chosen to do with it. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving yourself right. We'd done that. Oh, how we'd done that.